Hi, I'm Emily Mossberg. I'm Deloitte's Global Cyber Leader, and I am with you today to share a little bit about our 2023 Future of Cyber survey. This is a survey that we have been conducting now for the last few years. It looks this version was was taken as a global version. We interviewed or polled over 1,100 leaders, not just CISOs, by the way. This was across the executive suite, focused on CIOs, CISOs, CEOs, COOs, chief marketing officers, even, to get their views related to cyber. And we wanted to, again, make sure that this was truly a global survey. And as you can see from a representation standpoint, we have pretty good distribution from around the globe, with 40% of the participants in the survey being from EMEA. And if we think through or look at what does that mean in terms of Spain and the participation of Spain in this survey, about 3.5% of the respondents in the survey were from Spain. We had representation across all 6 industries, and about 2/3 of the respondents were in C-suite business roles. So we not only had a broad global view and strong regional participation, we also had significant participation from Spain itself. Broadly across the globe, we had strong industry participation. As I mentioned, in Spain, we did have representation across all 6 industries, and we had a breadth of organization size participating in this survey. If we push ahead, let's talk a little bit about what did we learn in this survey. For years, we've been saying that cyber is more than a technical issue. And the results of this survey really underscore that. The results show very clearly that cyber has become a very foundational and integral part of an organization's business strategy, especially given the visibility that exists across the C-suite, the executives, and at this point, we've got so much board governance related to cyber as well. And we're going to talk through the results that we have seen, which highlight the fact that there's a new dynamic emerging around the collaboration needed and the different stakeholders that need to be at the table from a site when we're dealing with cyber and making sure that we're integrating cyber into our organizations. If we push ahead, let's talk about the initial results that we saw that really highlight this concept that cyber is a business enabler, and the fact that we're seeing that increase over the course of time. First and foremost, cyber is making an impact in the business. 86% of those surveyed and participated reported that their investments in cyber and the cyber initiatives that they undertook as an organization were making significant positive contributions in business priorities. And the business priorities that we saw being identified, and really the ones that were rising to the top across the survey, included brand and reputation, customer and digital trust. We hear so much today about the importance of trust with consumers, with your customers, and there was truly a view that the cyber initiatives and investments that organizations had made were leading to increased customer and digital trust. Operational stability, making sure that operations are able to continue even in the face of a cyber incident. And last, certainly not least, in fact, it's one of my favorite metrics to point to, is the fact that organizations felt like the investments that they were making in cyber were having a positive impact on their revenue. All of this being said and being very positive, we continue to see the fact that the cyber landscape continues to be very sophisticated, and organizations continue to see increasing breaches and incidents. Over 90%, 91% of organizations reported that they had at least one event in the last year. And that is up only slightly, but we're getting very close to the top of the scale here over the last time that we ran this survey in 2021. Another interesting point in all of this is that organizations understand that this is a space that they need to keep investing in. 58% of the organizations that were part of this survey stated that they were planning to increase their cyber budgets within the next year, which is fairly significant given some of the financial pressures that organizations are facing today. If we move ahead, let's talk a little bit more about maturity. And that is something that we looked at in this survey as well, is what does an organization's cyber maturity say about how they are executing in certain areas of their cyber program? And we were able to identify low, medium, and high cyber maturity organizations based upon their level of planning, their engagement with the board, and the cyber activities that they had implemented. And if we look across the results of the entire survey, we see that 38% of the organizations, based upon their answers, would fall into a low maturity from a cyber perspective. 41%, which is the most across any of the categories, fall into medium maturity. And then we had 21% falling into the high maturity area, which meant that they adhered to 2 to 3 sets of the leading practices that we identified as they went through and answered their questionnaire. Across these maturities, we saw all maturity categories across all industries, all organization size, and all revenue. So it wasn't necessarily that all the high maturity organizations sat in a particular industry or were of a particular size. It was across the board. There was some dependency, or maybe I should say a lack of dependency related to industry or size or scale. Let's go ahead and push forward and talk a little bit more about what we learned and what lessons there are to learn here. As I mentioned, we truly are seeing this shift. It's no longer just a discussion on how cyber is strategically being integrated into an organization from beyond IT into the business. And those organizations that were categorized as high maturity from a cyber perspective had 5 core areas that jumped out in terms of the way in which they governed, executed, and managed their programs. First, they had multi-directional engagement. So cyber is one of those areas and capabilities where there needs to be direct integration with the business. In those that were identified as high maturity, there was bi-directional integration and engagement between the cyber organization and various areas of the business. Those that were high maturity were investing in their talent and had an understanding of the differing needs that they needed to plan for and execute against for their cyber talent. The third was planning. The organizations that were the most mature and were in the category of high maturity had robust cyber planning. They understood that they needed to be able to look into the future and make sure that they had a plan for how they were going to achieve their goals and objectives. They also had a linkage to the digital transformation initiatives across the organization and understood the criticality to integrating cyber into those digital transformation initiatives. And last but not least, those that were in the high maturity category had a broad and diverse set of tools and services that they implemented into their program across cyber. So let's dive in and explore this a little bit more. Let's talk a little bit about the specifics as it relates to multi-directional engagement and some of the things that we saw from a leadership perspective in those organizations that were high maturity from a cyber perspective. Those that were high maturity were nearly 3 times as likely as those that were low maturity to have a governing body that oversaw their cyber program. And this was often comprised of senior business and IT leaders. So it was a mix of leaders, not just in the IT space, not just in the cyber space, but across business and IT at the table. The other thing that these high maturity organizations are doing is planning, scenario planning specifically. And high maturity organizations were 3 times as likely as low maturity organizations to conduct incident response scenario planning at the organizational level and in many cases at the board level. So they're understanding what the potential incidents may be at their organization. They are testing those, running scenario plans, running cyber war games, and including leaders from across the organization to be ready to understand what it might look like if an incident were to occur and how they would want to respond. Let's push ahead. The second area that we'll highlight is related to talent and the fact that high maturity organizations were significantly more likely to identify a lack of skilled cyber professionals as a top challenge in their cyber program. And it's interesting because they recognize that there's a lack of talent. They also, if you look across a number of different capabilities from a talent perspective, tend to put more energy, put more effort into differentiation of cyber roles and capabilities as well. So, for instance, if you look at training and certification programs, high cyber maturity organizations, 64% of those organizations had in place training and certification programs specific to their cyber practitioners. That's significantly higher than those that were mature or medium or low maturity. Another area that's interesting to point out is differentiated compensation models. And in a space like cyber, where you've got some really specialized niche talent, it is important that you've got the right compensation models in place. And if you look at those that are high maturity, 48% of those had those differentiated models in place versus 37% at a low maturity level. So they recognize that talent is an issue and they're taking the steps to be able to capture cyber talent in the marketplace. Let's go ahead and push forward. Planning was a very important element that also rose to the top as it relates to high performing, high maturity cyber organizations. 87% of the high maturity cyber organizations have a cybersecurity incident response plan, and they are updating that plan on an annual basis. So they've got a plan in place, they're testing that plan, they're updating that plan. They also have an operational plan to defend against cyber threats. So they're not just looking at, well, what will happen when there is an incident. They have a plan around how are they going to defend against attack. 91% of the high maturity organizations have an operational defense plan. And then, how are they going to protect data? Data is becoming increasingly a focus and of targets. It's not just the network anymore. It's not applications. The data itself is a target. And high maturity organizations, 88% of the high maturity organizations had in place a comprehensive data protection program focused on the entirety of the data life cycle, including, where is data stored, how's it's processed, and how's it being transmitted and shared across the organization. Let's push forward, talk a little bit about digital transformation. As mentioned, organizations with high maturity understood the importance of embedding cyber and digital transformation. We wanted to understand, well, what are the digital transformation priorities that these enterprises have today? If you look at the top five for this latest survey, you'll see that cloud is at the top of the list. That is the global result. It's also the result for Spain. In Spain, cloud was the leading digital transformation priority, followed by data analytics, operational technology and ICS, artificial intelligence, and 5G. 5G was not on the list the last time we did this survey. In fact, the last time that we did this survey, the area that was on the list that isn't today was focused on ERP programs and large ERP implementations and upgrades. We're seeing that being reduced in priority in this latest survey, with more emphasis and focus on, well, what are the new risks of 5G? And what do we need to do to truly harness 5G within our organization? So let's push forward to talk a little bit about the importance of cyber to the digital transformation initiatives identified. If you look across the board, across cloud, data analytics, 5G, Internet of Things, and artificial intelligence, you'll see the high maturity organizations identified cyber as critical across the board more frequently than the medium and low. But you can really just see those that are more high maturity understand the importance of cyber across all of their digital transformation initiatives. Push ahead and talk a little bit about the ecosystem of tools and services. And as I mentioned, as we broached the subject of maturity across the board, the high maturity cyber organizations tend to have more vendors and more solutions in play. And as we look to the future, they also tend to want to have more solutions in the future as well. And I think this is likely based upon the fact that there's a recognition and understanding that we are getting more and more complex. There's a broadening attack surface. That's going to mean new solutions that are needed in order to deal with those new threats. If we want to go ahead and push forward, what does this mean from an industry standpoint? As I mentioned, across the board, we have industries that were high, medium, or we had high, medium, and low answers across all of the industries. But a couple of trends did pop out. From a cyber implementation or cyber activities implemented perspective, energy resources and industrials, government and public services, and technology, media, and telecom were all ahead of the pack as it relates to the cyber activities they had implemented. Interestingly enough, the results of the survey showed that financial services and consumer were slightly behind as it relates to implementation. If we take another lens and talk about strategy and planning strategy, those that came out slightly ahead were, again, energy resources and industrials, life sciences and healthcare, and financial services in this instance were ahead of the pack, and behind was consumer. These are interesting results, and in many cases, as we've shared the results of our survey, this is one of the areas where we've had the most dialogue. And it's interesting because this is all self-reported. So it's interesting to see how each of the industries sort of puts their lens on what they believe maturity to look like across each of these activities. If we push forward, let's just talk a little bit about what does this mean? Where do we go from here? What does the future look like? And I think one of the key things that really jumps out is the fact that cyber has got to be integrated from the beginning of any business strategy, any new innovation plans. Integrating cyber from the beginning allows organizations to be able to drive efficiency, and it enables them to grow their maturity from a cyber perspective. Broadly, digital transformation and new technology capabilities are more effective when cyber is embedded at the beginning, and is the cyber strategy, the cyber requirements are part of the broader picture. And as we have more emerging technologies, as we have more innovations in the market, and organizations have to shift the way in which they're using technology, that's going to continue to open up new cyber challenges. And it's something that we've got to be mindful of and watching across the board. Any new emerging technology is going to bring with it new cyber challenges. Having our eyes on that from the beginning, starting to think about that as soon as those new technologies and innovations are occurring, that's going to allow us to be able to really get the most out of those innovations. Let's go ahead and push forward. If you are interested in more information about our survey, if you'd like to download versions or look at different cuts of the data, you can do that at our website. There's a link here that provides you access to all of the materials that we have, inclusive of different cuts of the data and different articles based upon the data that we have. I hope you enjoyed listening to more about the Future of Cyber survey. And thank you so much for your time.